Rockstar at this point in time is known for three things: Grand Theft Auto, microtransactions, and Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the most best-selling games of all time. It is undoubtedly the best-selling Western game of all time, and it's absolutely worthy of those numbers. It's a fantastic game with incredible storytelling, fascinating gameplay, and surprising loyalty to the time period of the turn of the 20th century. The game is a direct prequel to 2010's Red Dead Redemption. To some, this was their first experience with the franchise, but to many gamers, like myself, Red Dead Redemption was a long-awaited follow-up to an older game, a Western shooter before the time of the PS3, a game that won our hearts with its innovative mechanics and iconic storytelling that was as elegant as most Westerns that our parents and grandparents watched on repeat. And that game was Red Dead Revolver. Red Dead Revolver was released in May of 2004. 17 freaking years ago if you're trying to feel old. I was 12 at the time, and admittedly, I didn't give a shit about video game development or production. I just liked playing games. I did have some brand loyalty though, particularly to Rockstar. By this point in time, they have released some of my favorite games that I've played: Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and Manhunt. Some straight up bangers. So when I caught wind of Red Dead Revolver, I rented it ASAP from my local Blockbuster. I didn't buy many games back in the day, okay, we were pretty broke. Doing some research for this video though, I discovered that the development process for this game was a giant struggle and was seriously close to getting scrapped altogether. It all started with a company named Angel Studios, a company that mostly made special effects for movies and music videos. Eventually their work caught the wind of Nintendo, who hired them to make a few games for the launch of the N64, enlisting them into what Nintendo called the Dream Team, along with other studios such as Rare and Acclaim. Angel Studios made several titles in the following years, such as 2 Ken Griffey baseball games for the N64, but they were not limited to only working for Nintendo. They made some other games like Midtown Madness for Microsoft on the PC. One of the most notable events in the company's history was when Capcom reached out to them to make an N64 port of Resident Evil 2. A massive undertaking, taking a game that was shipped as 2 CDs for the original PlayStation and putting that into a single 64-bit cartridge. The result was a success, and Capcom was thoroughly impressed with Angel. Capcom wanted to continue to work with Angel and wanted to make new IPs collaboratively. They rambled through several ideas, tossing around an idea of a tactical shooter like a SWAT type game, taking that idea and transferring it into a Western and keeping the SWAT name but changing the acronym to mean Spaghetti Western Action Team, all before looking back on Capcom's catalog for inspiration and finding Gunsmoke, a shoot-'em-up from 1985, and from there the idea of a spiritual successor was cemented, and Red Dead Revolver was born, with Capcom announcing the game in 2002. From here, the struggle began though. While Capcom wanted to continue the arcadey shoot-'em-up style of Gunsmoke, Angel wanted to make a game with more grit and realism, and the cultural differences between the development teams caused a standstill in progress. Enter Rockstar motherfucking Games. During the time of production, Angel was continuing to release games, most notably Smuggler's Run and Midnight Club underneath Rockstar, who were massively impressed by their work on Midtown Madness. Rockstar was growing rapidly, and they were running out of room for all their stacks of cash, so they had to start buying up some of their development partners. Angel Studios gladly made the deal because unlike other partners, Rockstar would allow them to do whatever the fuck they wanted. Capcom, with no real interest in continuing work on the Western game, dropped their involvement with the project, only retaining publishing rights if the game ended up being released in Japan. So with a new logo, a new deadline, and new freedoms with the development, Angel Studios became Rockstar San Diego and began work again on Red Dead Revolver. Most of the early work involved de-Capcomming the game, removing a bunch of ideas that just didn't mesh with the idea that Rockstar San Diego had for the game at the time. At the same time, trying to tie in all the elements that they had left over into a more cohesive game. With the typical Rockstar crunch on their developers, Red Dead Revolver was out in 9 months, and what a beautiful little baby it was. You know, that kind of looks like Owen Wilson from Shanghai Noon. While in 2004, Rockstar was known for their open world giants like GTA 3 and Vice City, Red Dead Revolver upset some fans by being a far more linear experience. In Revolver, you get one area that's open to explore, and that's Brimstone, a place full of NPCs to chat with, merchants, a saloon, and a way to progress onto the next mission. And you really only visit it a handful of times in the game. Most of the game is spent jumping mission to mission in a chapter-styled linear experience. With that being said, all the levels are really well done. There is no assets or locations reused throughout the game, and there's a good bit of variety thrown into each area, keeping them unique and memorable. The game has a strong devotion to maintaining the serious but slightly comedic approach to storytelling, similar to a lot of spaghetti western films. It took inspiration from the classics like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and A Fistful of Dollars. There's a clear care and effort put into maintaining an atmosphere of the classic old western story, all while using every western cliche imaginable, like train robberies, the lone bounty hunter looking for revenge, corrupt elected officials prospecting for gold, saloon brawls, and many more. The music and sound design is something that was done incredibly well throughout the game. Many of the songs are from classic western films, with composers like Ennio Morricone and Louis Bacalov, the latter of which composed the main theme and its reprise for the game, and he's also the same guy who composed the original Django movie. The sound design is also a lot of fun. I wouldn't say that it's perfect. If anything, it falls a little more toward the arcadey Capcom elements of the game, but it's done really well regardless. The twang of ricocheting bullets is like music to my ears as I'm cycling dual revolvers into clowns the size of fat golden retrievers. Everything sets the stage for the story, because even the most action-forward games have stories, and Revolver's no different, and it's actually pretty good. The game opens with a dusty old desk with a book laid atop it where you enter your name before the story begins to unfold, because it's quite the story. It's likely a little embellished, and of course it's over the top extravagant because it's a Rockstar game, but what legendary story isn't? Red Dead Revolver is the classic tale of revenge in the Old West. Red Harlow is the main protagonist. His parents are murdered when he's a young lad, and over the course of his life he sets out to seek revenge. He becomes a bounty hunter, a damn good one at that, and collects head after head, but never really for the money, just the opportunity to one day find the men that killed his parents. There are several moments in his journey to find the killers that broaden the scope of the story. You meet several characters that offer ancillary stories that intertwine with Red Harlow. Everything from a Native American Indian dispatching corrupt soldiers to an Englishman trickshot who fights for his freedom from his freak show employers. We'll do a deep dive into the plot a little bit later, but for now, let's discuss some gunplay for a moment. At its core, Red Dead Revolver is a third-person shooter. Typical run and gun style action. Most levels consist of entering an area, whether it be a town, a train car, or a gold mine, and killing off bandits and outlaws aplenty. Usually reaching some sort of boss at the end of each level with enhanced health and combat abilities, like Pig Josh, who runs around aiming to blow you sky high with some dynamite, or Mr. Black, a creepy gravedigger dude with a Gatling gun in his coffin backpack. Red starts off with his father's old 6-shooter, but of course there is a variety of weapons that you can equip, like the lever action rifle and double barrel shotguns. There's also some throwable items to use in a pinch, like Molotov cocktails, knives, or dynamite. A pretty basic cover system breaks up the run and gun style pacing of the game, allowing you not to get shredded when faced with too many enemies at once. It's nothing special, but cover systems were not really common at this time, so it was a welcome addition to the combat. The most notable mechanic of the game is no doubt Deadeye. Inspired by Max Payne's bullet time, Red slows time, allowing him to strategically place hit markers on his enemies before unleashing the barrage of bullets all at once into his foes. It's not only entertaining and vital to winning most combat situations, but again, like Max Payne, it's deeply cinematic and harkens back to the old Western film roots, seemingly directed by Sergio Leone himself. On top of the Deadeye that you can use at any point, as long as the meter is full, there are showdown events, which are essentially quick draw duels that further bring the Western to light. The setup for these are almost always better than the actual gameplay. The intense stare downs, the tough monologues, the brilliance of these set pieces absolutely makes the game. The actual function of the showdowns works just as Deadeye does, except drawing your weapon is incorporated into the mix. You have to grab your gun, draw it, paint your opponents with markers that'll kill them before they can do the same to you. The gameplay is what made this game, specifically the Deadeye mechanic. It's one of the only things that carried on into the Redemption titles. It was the soul of the game, but all of the gameplay was really fun. The moments in the story when you got to control a different character for a chapter or two was also a great breath of fresh air. I particularly liked playing as Jack Swift and Shadow Wolf. Both had different styles of combat than Red Harlow, including new special abilities to replace the Deadeye mechanic. Jack had a massive barrage of 12 rounds that would insta-lock onto surrounding enemies, emptying his dual revolvers in a stunning fashion, while Shadow Wolf can light an arrow on fire before firing from the shadows. The game came with a local multiplayer option as well, no online unfortunately. It had a few different game modes and used most playable characters from the story and most locations that you encounter in the game. With that being said, I do want to dive a little deeper into the plot of the game. It's a story that was really better than I remembered all those years ago, so I feel like it's worth running down here. Feel free to skip forward to the next chapter if you want to avoid plot spoilers or you just aren't interested. Either way, here we go. The game starts with Red Harlow welcoming home his father, Nate Harlow, after he's been out prospecting for gold. Turns out, his most recent travels in Bear Mountain have resulted in a success. He and his partner Griff struck it big and decided to celebrate by crafting 2 matching revolvers, like one of those best friend bracelets except more gunpowder. Nate is happy to see his wife and his son, handing down his old revolver to Red and telling him to go practice shooting while he takes his Native American wife, Falling Star, inside for her gift. It's not long before some outlaws show up to the Harlow home and wreak havoc. They murder Nate Harlow and Falling Star and burn the home to the ground before Red makes it back up the hill. Red takes out most of the bandits, but the leader of this ragtag crew, Colonel Darren, gets his arm shot off by Red after he grabs a revolver that's been sitting in the smoldering remains of his home. The revolver scars Red with a scorpion-shaped burn on his hand, but it ultimately allows him to escape. Turns out Griff, old Nate Harlow's revolver BFF, was captured by the military, and in order to save his own skin, he gave up the location to the gold in Bear Mountain, and at the same time outing his friend Nate by saying he too knows the location of the gold. So the army general, Javier Diego, decides to get rid of Nate and his family in order to secure the location of the gold, sending Colonel Darren and his minions out there to their homestead. Flash forward 12 years. Red is now a ruthless bounty hunter on the path to avenge his parents. He's scoping out bounties, and in the start of our adventure with him, he's in the process of dispatching the Bloody Tom gang, a gang led by none other than Bloody Tom. After killing them, Red takes their bodies to the closest town, Widow's Patch, for his money, only to discover that the town's been taken over by Ugly Chris and his gang of outlaws. Red channeling his inner John Wick after witnessing the gang kill his dog, he easily slaughters the group and saves the sheriff of the town, Sheriff O'Grady, but not without him being pretty severely injured, needing to be taken to the town of Brimstone for medical treatment. So, Red hops on a train with Sheriff O'Grady, casually stopping a robbery on the way to Brimstone. In Brimstone, he meets Sheriff Bartlett, who offers him several bounties in the surrounding area, leading Red to vicious outlaw after vicious outlaw. During one of them, he discovers an English trick shooter named Jack Swift. After killing all of his bounties, Red is informed that he won't be getting any coin for his troubles because the wagon carrying his payment hasn't reached the town yet. Frustrated, he heads into the bank, and while at the bank, he overhears a lady named Annie Stokes arguing with the bank over her payments, mentioning that the governor has mined enough gold out of Bear Mountain, and he has enough gold for himself that he doesn't need hers. Naturally, this perks up the ears of Red, so he nicely asks the bank man for Annie's address so he can swing by and chat with her. Red arrives just after Annie is finished fending off thugs from her home. The governor decided to burn her barn down since she decided not to sell it to him. She has no information on Bear Mountain, but sends Red in the direction of a saloon to get some gossip there. At the saloon, Red overhears a conversation about a man who got his arm shot off. Again, nicely asking for more information, he inadvertently starts a brawl. And in the end, Red gets arrested by Sheriff Bartlett and thrown in jail, where he continues his questioning about the one-armed man, saying that the man is responsible for killing his parents. Sheriff Bartlett at that point knows exactly who Red is. He's the son of Nate Harlow, and tells him that story of how Griff got caught up in a battle, and to save his own backside, he agreed to have Nate Harlow killed in exchange for partnering up with General Diego, giving the location of the gold mine in Bear Mountain. The sheriff releases Red on the condition that he brings in Diego dead, or, well, dead'll do.
The charges are dropped. If you reckon you can bring him in, dead or... well, dead'll do. Much obliged.
But after destroying one of Diego's supply carts, he is captured and sent to work in the gold mine. Another character is introduced here, Shadow Wolf. Turns out that he's Red's cousin. Remember, Red is half Native American himself. He witnesses not only that Red is alive, but that he was captured by Diego and sent into slavery, so he goes off to save him. He ends up freeing him and another captive named Buffalo Soldier, who is part of the US Army. Once they're free, they part ways. Buffalo Soldier heads to the governor, revealed at this time to be Governor Griffin. A little resemblance there. Anyway, he tells the governor that there is a corrupt general in his territory, Diego, who is running a gold mine with slave labor. The governor, obviously not too shocked with this information, casually excuses Buffalo Soldier from his office. Meanwhile, Red and Shadow Wolf raid Fort Diego, taking out a Gatling gun and in the end killing the one-armed bandit himself, Colonel Darren. Unfortunately, in this battle, Shadow Wolf does not make it, but Red takes his knife and plunges it into Colonel Darren's chest, avenging him. Red at this point pissed off not only because his parents are dead, but now his cousin is dead. He rides up to Diego's heavily armored train car to put an end to the corrupt general. After an intense battle, Red puts a bullet through Diego's head despite his attempts at bribing him.
Whiskey, women, fine weapons, anything you want. What do you say, partner?
And this puts an end to Red's adventure, or so he thought. After entering into a quick draw competition along with Annie and Jack, Red climbs his way to the semifinals before the governor steps in as the judge. And after Red wins the competition, the governor pulls out his own weapon on Red, saying that there's no way that he should have lived this long. The weapon that he pulls, none other than the second half of the BFF revolvers that his father bought after discovering gold in Bear Mountain. Red realizes who this governor is, the backstabbing coward Griff that sold out his father to General Diego. After chaos in the town, Red heads into the governor's mansion to exact revenge, with help this time from Annie and Jack Swift, both who have been wronged by the governor themselves. The assault on the estate is as blockbuster as they come. Several named enemies, a ton of explosions, duels aplenty. Red even frees Buffalo Soldier as he makes his way through the halls of the mansion. But it all ends with Red and Griff. Griff has no shame for what he did. He only regrets not making sure that Red died with his parents. So, as a result, Red puts him down. In the chaos, Jack Swift unfortunately did not make it. But Annie and Buffalo Soldier and the sheriff all rendezvous with Red in the front yard. The sheriff informs him that even though he was corrupt and a terrible person, the governor was still the governor, and killing him will end up with Red on a noose. He offers $5,000 to Red as a makeshift bounty for Griff so he can leave far, far from Brimstone. But he turns down the money, telling the sheriff to give it to Annie and Buffalo Soldier because this whole time,
it never was about the money.
Personally, I think this plot is amazing. It's the perfect classic Western style plotline. Revenge, backstabbing, greed, and honor, all concise with a fantastic cast of both good guys and bad guys. Every character was unique and brought so much to the table. Every mission added something to progress the story, even sometimes allowing you to play as one of the supporting characters to further tell the story from new perspectives, like Jack handling his former employer, Annie defending her farm, or Shadow Wolf on his way to save his cousin. None of these chapters were necessary, but they made everything feel bigger and more fleshed out, instead of being fully focused on Red the entire time. We all know this game went on to be followed up by Red Dead Redemption and its prequel, Red Dead Redemption 2, but surprisingly, these aren't direct follow-ups. Red Dead Revolver has absolute zilch to do with any of the Redemption games story-wise. There are some whispers in each game where you can find people talking about the legend of Red Harlow, but Dan Houser has stated that everything in Revolver is not canon to the franchise.
Yeah, my brother, he's dead now, but he used to tell me stories about Red Harlow.
Red Dead Redemption evolved in every aspect from Revolver. Where Revolver was linear and level-based, Redemption was open world. Combat was run and gun in Revolver, where Redemption it was less arcadey and more methodical. The only thing that remained was Deadeye, the iconic mechanic of the series. There is no doubt that Redemption 1 and 2 completely overshadow Revolver. They are objectively better games in every sense of the term, but Revolver is something truly special that I think a lot of people didn't get to experience. It sold pretty well and was received above average by most reviewers, but it just isn't mentioned most times when discussing the Red Dead franchise. And I find that kind of sad. I understand it completely, but I just wish this game got some more love and recognition. So I'm doing my part with this video. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I do hope to see you next time. Peace.
That was incredible! You saved my life!
All in a day's work. I only wish it were more financially gratifying.